Yesterday evening, there was a mention of Samsára and nirvana, and Buddha's words that nirvana and samsara are not two, they are one. I am not a student of Buddhist religion. I don't know if the Buddha explained any more about this beautiful sentence. Nor do I know whether any subsequent interpretations have been made. But the way I interpret that sentence, nirvana and samsara are one, relates to the seeker who seeks nirvana as a place to escape into from the difficulties of samsara. The seeker seeks nirvana as a place to escape into from the unhappiness of samsara. And the Buddha tells him, you can't do it. They are not two. You can't go from the seaside to the mountains. So if you have to enjoy nirvana, it can only be done in samsara. If you want to enjoy nirvana, you can do it only in samsara. That is my interpretation of it. You cannot escape from life into enlightenment. You cannot escape from life into self-realization. A friend of mine told me once, he, his father, and his father before him used to go in Bangalore, man from Bangalore, to a well-known ashram. In fact, he used to go to the Ramakrishna mission and see the Swami regularly and talk to him. This friend of mine, a young man, somehow didn't feel inclined to go as regularly as he was supposed to. So the Swami of that particular ashram mentioned to my friend's father, your son doesn't come, I haven't seen your son for quite some time. He just mentioned it in fairness to him as something that is there. I haven't seen your son for a long time. So the father mentioned it to the son, and he said, why don't you go and see him? So the son next time did go and see him. And then they talked for a while. And then my friend asked this Swami, he says, Swamiji, may I ask you a question? I hesitate to ask it. It is asked in all sincerity and it is not, it may sound like an impertinent question, but it is not. I assure you, it is asked in all sincerity. So if you promise not to get angry with me or to tell my father, I shall ask you this question. And the question was this. Swamiji, he said, you have been in this ashram or some other ashram for 25, 30 years. And you are supposed to advise the ordinary man about his problems in life. So my question to you is this. You have been in this place, safe and secure, for 30 years. If you had to go out into life without the protection of the ashram for 6 months, could you do it? The Swami was startled. He thought for a moment and he said, no, I don't think I could do it. So, very often, the spiritual counselors have really no idea what they are talking about. They have no experience of life. And they tell you how to live your life. Therefore, my point is that you have to live in your life in samsara and still find nirvana. What has been happening is this. I find that my speaking, my teaching, over the last 10, 12 years has been getting more and more and more focused. And the reason is this. For the last several years, when people have been coming to see me, mainly to be able to help the man with whom I am dealing, I ask him his details. What he is, what his profession is, whether he is reasonably comfortable in life. The reason I ask whether he is comfortable in life is that I do not discount the value of money. I've been a banker for 35 years. And it would be adding insult to injury to speak to a hungry man about Advaita. So if I know that the man is in a reasonably comfortable position financially, then he is entitled to speak about Advaita. The next thing I ask him is, how long has he been seeking? Sometimes 25 years, sometimes 30 years. Very often, you will be surprised how often. The answer is, ever since I can remember, probably in my teens. And he names the gurus he has been to, the books he has read. So I ask him, so with all these reading and meeting gurus, what is your understanding now about what you are seeking? What is your understanding now of what you are seeking? And believe me, I have never ever had one answer. This is what I am seeking. Not once. So when I kept getting this situation, I said to myself, the one thing I should be able to tell my visitors who have come from long distances after spending a lot of money is something they should be able to repeat to their friends. So I tell them. So when you go back to France or America, or Germany or the States, and when someone asks you, what did Ramesh have to say? You should be able to say, Ramesh says 1, 2, 3, 4, and I do not agree with any one of them. That is different. All I want is that you should have a clear idea of what I am saying, of what the teaching is. The only thing I don't want is a sort of confused idea with which they come to me. So the teaching has become, over the years, more and more focused. So now, as I say, the seeker begins seeking nirvana as a way of escape from the samsara into the nirvana. and the seeker reaches some stage of understanding when he realizes that there is no place as nirvana to escape into. Assume that nirvana is peace. So what he wants is peace. And if he wants peace, he has to find it in samsara, in life. He cannot escape from life to seek peace. Then it cannot be the peace that he wants. And the peace the seeker is trying to find, he knows it. He is not aware of it individually, personally, but he knows it. So I tell him, what you are seeking, you know what you are seeking. But I don't. That's the whole point. For 30 years I've been seeking. I don't know what it is. But I say, you do. You do know, but you are not aware of it. Big difference. And that peace which I tell the visitor, he knows but is not aware of, is that state which prevails in deep sleep. In other words, what he is seeking in life, in his daily working life, during the waking state, what he is seeking is that peace which prevailed in deep sleep. Individually, he is not aware of it. And that peace he can find in the waking state if, by the grace of God, if it is God's will and the destiny of that body-mind organism, he can find that peace if the basic condition which prevails in deep sleep, bringing about that peace, also prevails in your waking state, in your daily life. If that condition which prevails and therefore brings about the peace in deep sleep exists in your waking state, in your daily life, only then can that peace of deep sleep prevail in the daily life, in waking state. It's as simple as that. And that is why, I repeat, Ramana Maharshi said, self-realization is the simplest thing. And I repeat, I do not take Ramana Maharshi's words lightly, ever. So if he says self-realization is the simplest thing, it is the simplest thing. Then it is for me to find out, why does he say it's the simplest thing? For this reason. If I am able to find that condition which prevails in deep sleep to prevail in the waking state, then the peace of deep sleep must prevail in the waking state. The only difference then being, in deep sleep there is no manifestation. Therefore, there is no witnessing manifestation. In waking state there is manifestation. Therefore, there is witnessing of manifestation. In the waking state, witnessing of manifestation. In deep sleep, no witnessing of manifestation, because manifestation doesn't exist. That is the only difference. So what is that condition which prevails in deep sleep, which brings about the peace you are seeking in the waking state? That condition is the absence of the individual doer, generally known as the ego. The ego does not prevail during deep sleep, therefore peace prevails. So if during your waking state and your daily life, the ego, the sense of personal doership, should disappear, then the same peace must prevail. So how does the sense of personal doership disappear? I asked people, surely this kind of thing must have been discussed at your various places you have been to? They said no. We were only told, I was only told what I should do and what I should not do to get what I wanted, which is the peace. So I say, I'm afraid I have to tell you the exact opposite. You can do bloody well nothing to get that peace. That is the whole point. To understand that I can do nothing. I can do nothing. I'm not capable of doing anything. That is the only understanding. Again, that is why Ramana Maharshi said, self-realization is the simplest thing. Only thing Ramana Maharshi did not add was that it is not in your control. But that is what is understood. That is not in your control. Therefore, I asked the visitor, you have been seeking for 30 years. Do you remember when it started? No, he doesn't remember. So I said, have you ever thought that you never did start the seeking? The seeking happened. Why did the seeking happen? Because it was God's will. And the destiny of this body-mind organism for that spiritual seeking, seeking of that peace in deep sleep state, that seeking began. You had no control over it. Philip, would you mind? Okay. So how can this me disappear in the waking state? First, to find out who is this me. The me is a sense of personal doership. So only when the sense of personal doership disappears does that peace of the waking in the deep sleep state prevail here. So my teaching focuses down into just one thing. Find out if you are the doer of any action which you think is your action, which is the same as Ramana Maharshi's question, who is me? Who am I? And he used the word I because he didn't speak in English. I think it's only one of the very few languages in which I am told there is a difference between I and me. So Ramana Maharshi had to use the expedient of saying I is the me, the ego. And the source from which the I has come, he used to say I. In the English language, it's not necessary. So it used to confuse some people. What is this I Ramana Maharshi is referring to? So I is the source, I, and the I which he uses is the me. So the question, who am I, really boils down to who is this me? This me who thinks he is the thinker, he is the doer, he is the experiencer. Whereas what is really happening is, thinking is happening, doing is happening, seeking being one of the part of the doing. Experiencing is happening, and there has never been a thinker, a doer, a seeker, or an experiencer. So that the individual has to find out for himself from personal experience. Therefore, I tell my visitor, I don't much care for the word sadhana, but it is useful. So, if you think, and the thing has been ingrained so much that you think you have to do some sadhana. My basic point is, if sadhana is necessary, it will happen only if it is God's will and the destiny of this body-mind organism seeking God or the peace. It is not the privilege of any individual ego to demand nirvana or peace. So, that you have been seeking makes it clear that God's grace is already upon you. It is because of God's will that the seeking has started. The seeking will lead ultimately to the annihilation of the me as the doer. So, if there is any sadhana that you think you should do, according to my understanding, there is just one sadhana. Any other sadhana that you like to do, you are free to do, because you have free will. Do whatever you want. So, if you like to meditate, meditate. If you don't like to meditate, don't force yourself to meditate. If you like to sing bhajans, sing bhajans. If you don't like to sing bhajans, when bhajans start here, you walk out. You know, at Maharaj's place in the evenings, bhajans used to be sung, but they were not like this. They were the traditional Hindu bhajans, you know, with bells banging, cymbals rocking, enormous noise. You see? And the very first time I was there, Maharaj noticed I couldn't bear it. You see? And I normally didn't go in the evening. Maharaj once asked, he said, you don't come in the evenings? So Maharaj, I said, morning session is enough for me for the 24 hours. I wouldn't be able to digest another session in the evening, which was true. So once what happened was, Maharaj said, the translator in the evening is not able to come. Would I come? I said, certainly, with pleasure. So I went there. But it so happened that the evening translator was there, so I didn't have to do anything. Then the talk was over and the bhajan started. Maharaj looked at me and he says, so the sadhana I suggest is only one. Find out from your own personal experience whether there is any action you are entitled to call your action. My theory is that any action that you call your action is a mere reaction of the brain to an input into this mechanical human body. The brain responds to that input put in by the source of God, and out comes an output strictly according to the programming. And the programming is unique genes or DNA plus environmental conditions. And you will come to the conclusion that no action can you really call your action. How long this will take? Again, God's will. There was one particular gentleman he was so ready and ripe. He was living in a Zen monastery for some years. When he came here, he came for 10 days, stayed on for 3 months. And when towards the end of his life, he never asked any question. So, a day or two before he left, he said, I would like to say something. Everybody was astonished. And he said, I can't tell you how much your sadhana has done for me. In 30 years, I was not able to come to this point. And he said, here, you asked at the end of the day, find out. Any action is your action. And he said, he was ready, as I told you, very, very ready, very ripe. He said, I did that one evening, and I said I could really 10, 15 actions I could investigate and come to the conclusion, none of it was my action. And then he said the next day, he said, I didn't have to wait until the end of the day to make an investigation. As the actions happened, the conviction came, this is not my action, this is not my action. He said the very next day, the conviction came by itself. This is not my action. So, the sadhana is to find out whether any action is your own. And when you come to the conclusion that no action is your action, then instead of the mind or ego asking the question, who am I? The question, if no action is my action, who is this me, comes out from the very depths of your being. The intellect doesn't ask it. The question, who is this me who thinks he's the doer? And I know I don't do anything. That question then comes from the very depths of your being. And the depths of your being is the source. So the question comes from the source, and the answer also comes from the source. There never has been a me. All there is I, functioning through all the me's and you's and he's and hers. So the question comes from the source, from the depths of your being. And the answer too comes. And that is the end of the ego. That is the annihilation of the ego. So with the annihilation of the ego, how does life function? In other words, how does a sage live? From my own personal experience, I find what happens is life goes on as before. That means only thing is, where is the difference? Difference is this: the extinction or the annihilation of the ego. What does it mean in practice? What means in practice is no doubts, no expectations, no frustrations. That is the only difference. In other words, I would say the sage lives in duality. The ordinary man lives in dualism and therefore becomes happy or unhappy. What do I mean by duality? Duality means the basis of life itself, the total unconditional acceptance that there have always been Mother Teresas on the one hand and psychopaths on the other. That life is based on interconnected opposites over which no human being can possibly have any control. Therefore, the opposites must exist, happiness and unhappiness, beginning with Adam and Eve. I've said Adam and Eve reminds me of a joke. When the Lord created Eve for Adam, Adam was delighted. So he thanked God for creating Eve for him. He said, but I want to know. He said, why did you make Eve so beautiful and so attractive? So the Lord says, so that my son, you may love her. And why did you make her so considerate and looking after my welfare? So that my son, you may love her. Then he said, but Lord, why have you made her so stupid? So he said, so that my son, she may love you. Otherwise, who would love a male chauvinist? So, the sage lives in duality, accepting the opposites, also knowing that one or the other must prevail. So, what happens to the sage is, sometimes he knows happiness will happen, sometimes unhappiness. So, the sage also knows, see, again, words can create havoc. Separateness and oneness. What does it mean? Does it mean that separateness gives way to oneness? That means once there is enlightenment or self-realization or the absence of the ego, does all separateness disappear? You see, all these points are not clear. That is exactly what I did not want to happen as far as I am concerned. So, separateness and oneness. Separateness and oneness are both part of duality. Separateness and oneness do constitute duality. So, for the sage, the separateness exists. Of course it exists. The moment the sage answers to his name being called, it means there is identification with a name and form separate from everybody else. If Jesus were called by name or Ramana Maharshi were called, he responded. So the fact that the sage responds to his name being called means there is identification with a name and form as a separate entity. Separateness doesn't disappear. The sage doesn't call oneness. The sage doesn't see everybody as clones, perhaps of himself. The sage notices the difference. And according to his programming, sight of something or the thought of something could bring about a reaction, one or the other, like or dislike. Then where is the oneness? If separateness continues to exist, where is the oneness? The oneness lies in the total unconditional acceptance that all these differences are only in appearances. That underneath there is a total acceptance, that it is the same consciousness or source or God functioning through every body-mind organism. There is total unconditional acceptance that no one can do anything. No one is capable of doing anything. That is the oneness. Oneness lies in the total acceptance that it is God or consciousness or the source or the primal energy, whatever you call it, functioning through every human being. Therefore, no human being is truly responsible for anything. So if somebody's action, really action happening through some other body-mind organ hurts me, then it is God's will and the destiny of this body-mind organism to be hurt. The acceptance of this is the oneness that is talked about. as distinct from separateness. So what I am saying is, as far as the sage is concerned, both separateness and oneness exist as part of the duality which is the basis of life. So, how can the ordinary man find nirvana in samsara? When he accepts that samsara are the waves in the ocean, and the depth of the ocean is nirvana. The waves, when you get tossed about by the waves, it is the me, the ego. So all you have to do, if you are able to do it by the grace of God, is to go slightly deeper into the ocean, which is what happens in deep sleep, and which can happen even in your waking state, when it is found that no one is the doer of any action. I'm not saying it is easy to accept the fact that I am not the doer of my actions, but more difficult than the acceptance that I am not the doer, more difficult is the acceptance of you are not the doer. I may be able to accept that I am not the doer, but accepting that you are not the doer is not so easy. So the real acceptance is not that I am not the doer, but that you are not the doer. Therefore, I can never hate you. So, what happens to the sage is that he lives in duality, accepts the happiness and unhappiness. Now, how has that affected me? My own experience is this. As I said earlier, no expectations, no wants. No wants, but needs may arise. And the need could be physical, mental, whatever. And my own experience has been that when the need is real, it has been satisfied. Let me give you one, and the need, when I say need, I am not talking of a big need. It could be the smallest need. I'll tell you what happened once. In Hollywood, my second series of seminars, I remember because my wife was present. First time, I was not allowed to take my wife. Second time, I don't know, either I insisted or the offer was made, I don't know. Probably the offer was made because the organization was done by someone else. It was done by Wayne. Anyway, my wife and I were there. And when I traveled, I used to take a small photograph, little bigger than a passport photograph, of Ramana Maharshi. I had always done that. And I would take it out and put it somewhere on the table. So one morning, as I was getting ready for the talk, I said to my wife, I said, when we go back, I must get a reasonably big portrait of Ramana Maharshi and fix it on the wall opposite my desk. Literally, before the talk began, 15 minutes after the need arose, someone walks in and he says, Ramesh, I don't know why, but I thought you would like this. And he brings a framed photograph, just about the size I had in mind, of Ramana Maharshi. He said, I don't know why, but I thought you may like this. And that photograph, I call it Hollywood Ramana. sits before my desk now, and it's been 12 years. So my wife once teased me, he says, in a burst of generosity, you may give anything that you have, except Hollywood Ramana. I said, yeah. So needs arise, needs get fulfilled, and each time it happens, a tremendous sense of gratitude arises. Gratitude by whom, to whom? Question doesn't arise. A tremendous sense of gratitude arises. But that does not mean that pain and grief don't arise. They do too. That is exactly what I mean by the sage living in duality. Of course, grief arises. As I mentioned, my son died in Bombay when I was in Seattle. My wife and I were in Seattle. Grief arose, of course it arose. And I often mention the case of Ramana Maharshi, when they got the news that an old attendant of his, close friends for many years, close associates, died. There were tears in Ramana Maharshi's eyes. So grief arose. Then I still bite my tongue and get seriously hurt. I still stumble over stools in the dark and get myself hurt. I still have backaches which puzzle the specialist. But what comes with the pain is the amazing ability to accept it. The amazing ability to accept it to such an extent that the depth of the hurt, the intensity of the hurt does not remain in memory. It does not remain in memory. So this way, happiness happens, or take another case. Say for instance, I get a report that my grandson is at the top of a class, whatever it is. Of course a sense of pleasure arises. So I don't know whether I have made it clear, but I have tried to, what I mean when I say that the sage lives in duality. What do I mean when I say the ordinary man lives in dualism? Dualism means not accepting duality. Accepting duality, you accept opposites. Living in dualism, you do not accept the opposites, you always want one against the other. That makes for unhappiness. What is the cause of unhappiness? Not accepting the basic duality of life. That is dualism, and that is the basis for unhappiness. Well, I think that's enough for today. 40 minutes. That's another habit this body-mind programming has, to look at the watch. Not, I don't have to go anywhere. But that's what happens. So please ask any question that you like, however personal the basis, and I'll try to answer them in as straightforward a manner as possible.
when you were talking about deep sleep, is it? I believe it's said in one of the Yoga Sutras that the sage never sleeps. Is that what you meant?
I couldn't do without my 7 or 8 hours sleep. You see, the problem is people use words without making clear what they mean. That, as I told you, was my very first thing. I must be clear. Whether the person to whom I am talking is able to accept it or not is totally another matter with which I am not concerned. The meaning probably is, the sage never sleeps, is probably the understanding that there is no such thing as a sage. That there is no such thing as an individual who sleeps. Who sleeps? The body sleeps. You see? The body sleeps as part of its states. Now, curiously, there was another famous writer, as a matter of fact, it was J. Krishnamurti, whose book, The Awakening of Intelligence, had a tremendous impact on me at the appropriate time. So I'm forever grateful to him for that impact. And yet, when I came across his book, and he said, I never have dreams in the night. I closed the book and I said, surely. I said to myself, only a person who lives in the Himalayas, never coming in contact with anybody called life, there I can imagine not having dreams. But he lives in Ohio, or he lives in Zurich. He meets people. He gets angry when a question how is asked. Choiceless awareness. Somebody asks, how do I get into choiceless awareness? Don't ask me how. And he would say, if I give you a bottle of poison and tell you not to drink it, will you ask me how do I not drink it? So I was delighted when I came across a statement in Ramana Maharshi's book. Someone asked him, do you see dead people? And Ramana Maharshi said, only in my dreams.
Could I ask a second question? That
please.
When you use a concept like God's will or
yes.
destiny,
yes.
in the end, even that is a concept.
It is indeed.
And that is like Ramana's thorn to take out the concept of the individual doer.
Absolutely correct. That is exactly what it is. Therefore I said, whatever any scripture of any religion has said, whatever any sage has said at any time is a concept. The only truth being the impersonal sense of awareness. In that state, there are no thoughts. Therefore, there are no concepts.
Thank
you. I'm Ramesh.
Sure.
No action is my action. I investigated this very much in the last days. So I still have to ask a useless question. There is something like a great despair coming up, and I want to do something about it, but I know that I cannot do anything about it.
Oh no.
So I know the answer already. What do you give?
So what is the answer?
That I can do nothing.
On the contrary, you can do whatever you like. I've said it so many times. What more freedom do you want? You can do whatever you like, or meaning you can decide to do whatever you like.
But it is according my programming.
So?
It is not my free will.
So? But that doesn't prevent you from making a decision. Why? Because the energy inside this body-mind organism will not let you not make a decision. The decision may be not to make a decision, but it's still a decision. The energy functioning through this body-mind organism will not let this body-mind organism remain idle. Every split second, some action will happen, physical or mental. So you cannot even say, I shall not do anything.
Thank you.
Margaret, Elke, and Mark, speaking about their experiences, they said that seeker disappeared and the search ended. And I heard the expression that seeker disappears, but the search goes on.
That's somebody saying, is it? Is that somebody saying? You're saying?
Somebody said it.
So,
that the search goes on without the seeker.
the sage goes...
Search.
Yes.
Search goes on without the seeker.
See, the search began without a seeker.
And goes on without the seeker?
So, the search ends
And
when the seeker understands that there never was a seeker.
but what about the search? Could the search goes on without the seeker?
You should ask someone who said that. Why me?
There's no questions, Ramesh? No questions.
Yes.
I just want to, just gratitude, and to all the teachers here. And I don't know if it can get clearer, you've made yourself so utterly, continuously clear.
As I said before, my only job is to be clear. Whether it is accepted or not is God's will.
Thank you.
And my job, as allotted by God.
You're talking about the universe, about the world as a net of jewels, for example, and when Wayne says that all including harmony or something like that, is that only because there is no neutral word for it? Because when you say the sage lives in duality,
In duality.
yes, I guess this is the net of jewels. Good things, bad things, whatever is a jewel.
Yes.
But the way it is expressed is a positive way. It's a beautiful picture. So is there any experiencing of beauty of all that?
You see, when you talk of beauty, in life, in duality, you have already decided something is ugly. The moment you think something is beautiful, have you not already decided something is ugly?
Yes, that's true. But still, why isn't it? And why did you describe as a net of jewels?
A net of jewels.
Yeah.
A net of jewels, the basis of it is what happens in life is not anybody's actions, but actions brought about by the energy or source through the billions of human beings, and all those actions are interconnected. All those actions which happen through are interconnected. Therefore, truly you cannot separate one action. The moment an action has happened, it has reverberations on, you never know. Somebody says something in the States, and it can affect anywhere in the world, you see.
I know the answer to these questions because you.
All we want is confirmation.
Well, no. The two questions is.
Yes.
Why is there manifestation at all?
Sorry? Why is there a manifestation at all?
And I think you would say, well, why not?
No, I understand, but that is true. Or the other question, who wants to know?
And
but there is a conceptual answer to this conceptual question.
it goes together with the other question. Why is the manifestation and what is the purpose of it? And then you said, well, it's the Leela. It's
No,
the
wait
play.
a minute. Yeah. The purpose of it, the created object can never know. Because the created object can never know the will of the creator's subjectivity. So why has the manifestation happened is a conceptual question, and the conceptual answer is that it is the nature of energy to activize itself. It is the nature of potential energy to activize itself sometime. So, if it didn't activize itself sometime, it wouldn't be potential, it would be dead matter. So, it is the nature of the potential energy to activize itself sometime or the other. And when the burst of energy which has created the activization ends, the creation goes back into the potential until the potential again activizes itself. That is the conceptual answer to your question.
Yes, but these are just more concepts.
I'm sorry?
These are just more concepts, what you just told me.
These are the concepts.
I mean, they're just more concepts. I mean, I understand what you're saying, but somehow there's something missing.
Yes, that something missing is self-realization.
Is it right that you cannot recommend any method to come nearer to this status of deep sleep? You cannot recommend any method, preparing, or anything else.
Do I have any method?
Yes.
For whom? Do I have a method?
No.
For whom?
Yeah.
To do what?
To find this.
Let me help you. What you are saying is, do I have a method for the seeker? To do what? To achieve self-realization? Is that your question? But the very basis of what I say is, no individual seeker exists. So there is no individual seeker to achieve self-realization. You see? But so long as there is a seeker who needs a conceptual system or a method, as you say, the method that I recommend is investigation into any action that you find during the day from personal experience to find out whether any action, small or big, was your action. That is the only sadhana effort I would recommend. You see, and that is recommended to the ego, because it is the ego who has to convince himself or herself that there is no action which he or she can truly call his or her own. Only the ego himself has to be satisfied. Somebody else's experience is no good for the ego in this body. And even that effort will be made only if it is God's will, not otherwise.
Is the ego a valuable entity while it exists?
I'm sorry?
Is the ego a valuable
If the ego
thing?
is valuable,
Is it valuable while it exists?
I mean, are you asking why does the ego exist?
I was asking if it has value for the individual while...
The ego, does the ego have value?
Yes.
Is that the question?
Yes, that's the question.
Then the ego has tremendous value, because without the ego, life as we know it cannot happen. The ego is the very essence of the happening of life. You see? The ego is the very essence of the happening of life. Without the ego, life as we know it wouldn't happen.
Ramesh,
Yes, sir.
is the potential energy, is it the same within consciousness?
I'm sorry?
The potential energy.
Yes,
Is
yes.
it the same within consciousness?
Absolutely.
Consciousness?
You see, that's why I said the source, potential energy, consciousness at rest, absolute, noumenon, or God. Same thing. Different names for the same thing, which is the source, one without the second. The source, whatever known you call it, so long as the understanding is that you refer to the source, no problem. So potential energy is consciousness at rest. Activized energy is consciousness in movement.
Ramesh, you
Yeah.
talk about the deep sleep, where no witnesser is there and there is no manifestation.
Yes.
What about with dreams in this state? For me, it's a manifestation, where it comes from.
Dreams is a different state from deep sleep, isn't it?
Right.
So dream, again, my concept is that the personal dream that you have happens in identified consciousness. This dream that is happening, which everybody has, is in the universal consciousness. And the two are amazingly alike. There is really no difference between your personal dream and this universal dream. Same things which happen in your personal dream happen in this universal dream. You wake up from your personal dream in a physical state of waking up. You wake up from this universal dream when the understanding happens. The final understanding happens that the dream is happening by itself, that no individual is necessary, individual doer is necessary for the dream to happen. then there is a waking up.
Okay. Thank you.
Most welcome.
A question to be clear. You say that your only job is to be clear. That's right. What does it mean? Mean it that I have to see that I am living in a duality, or does it mean I have to see that I am a seeker? What do you mean?
All I say is, all that needs to happen, please, I repeat, all that needs to happen is the total acceptance, total unconditional acceptance that no one is the doer of actions which happen through that body-mind organism, neither you nor anyone else. That is all that is necessary to happen for the self-realization or whatever you call it to happen. Just the total unconditional acceptance that neither I nor anyone else is the doer of any actions at all. That is the only thing that is necessary to happen. And it will happen only when it is God's will or the destiny of the body-mind organism of the seeker.
Okay, thanks.
Ramesh,
yes.
I would like to ask you what your experience is in the difference between intellectual understanding of the teaching
Yes.
and that which you call the final understanding.
I see. What is the difference? The difference is this. Please sit down. The difference is this. The intellectual understanding is that what I say appeals to your sense of logic. You say what Ramesh says seems to be true. Seems to be true, but I can't accept it. There are many questions, there are many yes buts. So that at the intellectual level, there is an understanding that what is said seems to be true, seems all right, seems logical. It's difficult to find a flaw in it, and yet deep down, I am not able to accept that I am not the doer. I still think actions are my actions. Although from what you say, I accept intellectually, that is the intellectual acceptance or the understanding. Then the process of investigation begins. You begin to investigate day after day, choosing any number of actions during the day to find out whether any of those actions, simple or otherwise, were your action. And when this investigation goes on, that is the process for the intellectual understanding to go deeper. And when this investigation takes you to a point where you have no more doubts, then the intellectual understanding has become the total understanding. And that the process is the personal investigation. From your personal experience, you investigate, find out, is there any action which I can truly call my own? You see, and you come to the conclusion, at least today, no action has been my action. And you keep on doing it, then at a certain point, the question arises from the depths of your being, as I said, if I don't do any action, and of that I am convinced. If I don't do any action, and of that I am convinced, then who is this me who thinks it is her action? Is there a me at all? That question arises from the depths of your being. When day after day after day, You investigate and come to the conclusion that no action during the day could ever be really called your action. So that is the process. The investigation is the process which takes the intellectual understanding deeper.
Ramesh.
Oh, you've got it. Okay. Yes.
Thank you for all. There was a lot of understanding the last days. And still there's a lot of why. Why is this? Why is that? Up to why is why bothering me so much?
You see, then I told you, any question, you go back to the basics and the question will disappear. Why is something happening is because it is God's will. You see, why am I concerned? Why do I not get the answers? That's because it is God's will. The only answer you cannot get to the why, I repeat, the only question, why, to which you cannot get an answer is, why does God do this? That you cannot get an answer, because a created object can never know the will of the Creator's subjectivity. But otherwise, any question in this phenomenality, especially about the individual, go back to the basics, and there's the answer. Why is this? Because it is God's will and the destiny of this body, mind, organism.
Okay. Having all these thoughts, I found that what I'm seeking is silence.
All right. You call it silence, call it peace, whatever you like.
But
So
I can
silence,
hardly imagine that this
what do
can
you
be
mean?
found.
You see, what do you mean by silence? What do you think you mean by silence?
All these thoughts stopping.
So silence really means absence of thinking, isn't it? Absence of thinking, not absence of thoughts arising. Arising of thoughts is not in your control. Thoughts will arise, because thoughts arise from the source. You have no control over it. But that thought which arises can lead to horizontal thinking. And when that horizontal thinking is not there, it is silence. In other words, a thought arises or something is seen, and there is a natural response of the brain, and the natural response of the brain is accepted, witnessed. So there is no involvement which leads to horizontal thinking, which means peace. And that is exactly what happens in the case of a sage. He witnesses whatever happens, or whatever happens is really witnessed. So, mere witnessing prevents any horizontal involvement of thinking, which means silence.
Thank you.
Silence in spite of the existence of noise outside.
Ramesh, I accept your concept and I like it very much. My question is, in history, especially in Western culture, has there ever been a sage or a mystic or whoever who had the same concept or a very similar one?
I would think many. You don't know and I don't know.
But you studied more than me.
Oh no, I haven't studied. I haven't studied very much of comparative religions, but there are plenty. One that I can remember, modern say, is Master Eckhart.
Yes, I thought about him. In fact.
And there are many. I mean, any student of comparative literature will give you several names. Saint Francis of Assisi.
Yes, in fact, I wanted these names from you.
Does that make you happy? Yes. Good. Yeah, Saint Francis of Assisi.
Thank you.
Most welcome.
Ramesh, you've told that what we experience now is a universal dream. Is the universal dream.
Yes.
So is there a difference between a thought and this body-mind organism?
I'm sorry, say that again, please.
Is there a difference in this universal dream between a thought, a rising thought, and this body-mind organism?
So universal dream is that functioning of manifestation which is seen by everybody, which affects everybody. That is why you say it's universal. Your personal dream only you know. Therefore, the personal dream appears in your identified individual personal consciousness. Whereas this dream happens in the impersonal consciousness, which is what everybody says, I am. So that is the universal consciousness, and the dream is universal dream. The individual dream appears in individual consciousness. But what I am saying is, what happens in one happens in the other. So, if you are prepared to accept your personal dream as something not real, why not accept this universal dream also as not something really real?
Thank you.
Excuse my question.
I'm sorry?
What is...
Yes.
What you call God and what you call the source? What is the source for you?
For me, God means the source.
And I ask you, what is the source for you?
What is the source to me?
What is the source for you? Yes. That's the question in here.
The source is the one without the second, from which everything is emerged.
And what is the one without the second?
The source, which has no other source.
So it is something.
It is the source. By whatever name you call it, is immaterial. The source is one without the second. The source is that which has no other source.
And what is it?
What is that?
What is it for you?
For me it is the source.
But that's a name, nothing else than a name. What is it?
So, the answer to this, what you expect, is something which I don't have to say. That would also be just a word. The answer to your question would also be a word.
Yes. No, it would not be a word. That understanding I'm searching. I don't know.
Ramesh, I have a problem since years. I have the problem really to accept this play of duality here.
Yes.
So, also if it's God's will, so I'm a little bit like Lucifer since months.
So, the answer is again the same thing. I mean, you are here, are you not? And I still say, basically, you think it is your action, but some power, let us say the source, has sent you here. And you have listened to what is said. And what effect this listening is going to do to you, you'll just have to wait and see. That will again depend on the will of God who sent you here. You have listened, And what you have listened to, I repeat, is conditioning, is conceptual, is a conditioning. That conditioning could alter the existing conditioning to a certain extent. To what extent, you will have to just wait and see. Not in your control. Not in my control either.
So I will wait. Thank you.
Yes. Nice.
Ramesh,
yes.
You said in deep sleep there is no witness. That's right? And in waking state there is the witness.
No. In deep sleep, there is nothing to witness because there is no manifestation. In deep sleep, there is nothing to witness. In the waking state, there is manifestation and its functioning, which is witnessed, which is either witnessed or observed. It is witnessed by the sage, and in that witnessing there is no individual witnesser to judge what is witnessed. The ordinary person observes the same thing that is witnessed by the sage, and the observer, the individual observer, reacts to what is seen, judges it, and says he is happy or unhappy. That is the difference between observing and witnessing. The sage witnesses, or witnessing happens in the case of a sage, because there is no individual witnesser judging what is witnessed. Observing is done by the ordinary person, observing what is happening, judging it as something which he wants or does not want. And therefore, what is brings for happiness or unhappiness, because it is judged by the individual who wants something else, and therefore is either happy or unhappy.
So is it true then, as long as this self-realization did not happen, and I'm not in the state of where you are, where sage is, I only can do my best in observing my actions, but this is not true witnessing.
No, you are quite right. You can only do what you think is best. That is correct. Or decide to do what you think is best, more accurately.
So the rest I have to wait and see.
Wait and see. Shall we make it the last question, please?
Okay.
There's still tomorrow.
So if I understand right, it means that there is nothing like a personal decision-making possible, in fact.
Please say that again.
There is no personal decision-making possible, because you said before, do what you like, do what you want, but in fact, it's not the truth.
On the contrary,
yeah.
You are entitled to make a personal decision. In fact, I go to the extent of saying that you cannot not make a decision, even if that decision is not to decide. That was also a decision. Because the energy inside this body-mind organism will bring out some action, physical or mental. So that decision is part of the mental action.
Yeah, this I understood before, because the question arose before. But what I want to know is that I cannot do I can do a personal decision, but in fact it's God's will anyway.
That is correct.
Okay. So whatever I feel, I do. I decide. It doesn't really matter, because it's not my will anyway.
That is correct. But what I'm saying is, you cannot decide not to decide. But if even that would be a decision. But what I'm saying is, if you say, what's the use of making a decision? It's not my decision anyway. So, you have decided not to make a decision, which is itself a decision. We agree to disagree.